So I've got today the execution of the gold trade. That's mainly what I'm going to focus on today. Watch the whole trade also. It's only about 15 minutes long, and I'll explain sort of the key points afterwards and sort of what things I sort of learned from it. Just a few things that I could have done much better. Watching it back, and like you see, hindsight is obviously a great thing for sort of the next time, because it's sort of the first time I ever full size on actually a good trade, trying to improve it on that perspective. But then using hindsight from, say, the next time these things happen, and since then till now, how you trade a bit more size and you feel a bit more confident holding it, especially when you go on side quite away and you don't want to give away all the P&L that you potentially could make on the current one, and sort of how big the levels are, etc. Etc. Those sort of things you take from it, and sort of how necessarily the day was before this happened. But this is just a quick view. I'm going to go out into bigger time frames, weeklies, and scrunch up the hourlies. But I just explain sort of how I've been thinking of this. It's something I was waiting for a while. And so we had an inside day, pretty obvious. After you get a drop, it sits there, fills sort of this sort of area out. Yeah, then we consolidated. Then sort of my idea was to break the inside day and this low, and we had another weekly low, which was 1478.0. So my idea was just sort of like the trigger trade in a way, is that you get this low, which should then trigger the next low. Below that, obviously taking big key levels as well. I'll show you the roll round of sort of the hourly chart and something I've just noticed a few times. You get sort of a rounded top, sort of rolls down after you consolidate, rolls round, sort of loads of little tiny hourly highs, etc. Weekly lows, as I've explained, and there's plenty of recent value being structured here, after the sideways movement on the bigger scale of things. And something else, I describe the offer as more a sophisticated offer as it comes down to it. So as it comes down to it, not necessarily as it breaks, you get more of an aggressive sort of offer into it. But again, it's sort of after you get this one drop we got after the highs, I was always expecting this. You get either consolidation, it breaks in the same day, or you get the sort of the consolidation, the 2-day sort of 2-3 day drop, if you want to call it something like that. But you had more of I would say a sophisticated offer. There's sort of 3 different bits of price action I noticed during the day at all these levels. And the first time it was a bit different. I'll be able to show you on the 5-minute and explain it a bit more, sort of how different it was to the actual action we got. But again, looking at it from the bigger perspective, on sort of an hourly chart going back to a few months, you had all of this sort of value sideways, sort of going sideways for a while. There's obviously good trade in there, but what I notice is that you're just failing everywhere to get back above sort of these highs, which is always something that I look for. If you're going to play a break now, once you get back to the upside, you're going to look to break those. But you've sort of got the same on the downside. You've just got all this support, and then that would be your final target. I ended up changing my target during the trade, where it's a couple of hours down to there. But it's the same scenario. You've got positioning above here and you've got positioning all below here. So you've got all this sideways value in between. You've got this trend line which you eventually break and test back. A few spikes. So you've got all these key points to just think a massive bigger picture. And sort of the roll round I was talking about is sort of here. You sort of just get this slight sort of rolling round, and you just sort of break out that block on that previous day, and then you break, hold, test. So there's loads of components you can put together for then to get this bigger move. That's how I was thinking it, all that sideways, failing to get up there, You've got the technical downside, you get sort of that roll round, breakout, that top range, the same as you got on that previous one. You know, those are sort of things I stick together, and you've got such a bigger time frame for it. And then it comes on to sort of, this is the weekly profiles for gold. So you had, like, again, all of the value is here, filling in this giant area here. You know, and you're failing to go above. You know, you're getting sort of an area where it keeps wanting to break through, where previously you have got value. So you're sitting there looking at like that value's always been quite low, and you've got all of these, just these lows, and these are the sort of key lows you want to be taking, these two, and then you can target this giant poor low down at the bottom on the weekly chart. So that's, again, sort of, you go out into a bigger time frame, is what I think pretty much everyone in the office was looking at, specifically on this sort of day. So you got this one, this is sort of, you're just going out further out and you're scrunching up the charts, is what I like to do, and then you try and find little areas, or, you know, specifically bigger ones. There we go. Right, so this again, sort of how the day was. I think at the beginning of the day, so you had a China comment overnight which brought this lower, which then created some low volume. It's something that I do need to prove on where I shot spray in the end. Is just a question throughout the day of when you're getting this sideways and you haven't got this drop yet, where's your like access? I mean, selling in this sort of cave area is, you know, pretty spot on. It's just something else I need to improve on. But sort of this area at the beginning of the day, you sort of had, I class it as a, you know, a slow, horrible bit of price action. You know, a lot of rotation, a lot of two-way sort of trade, a lot of sort of flickery stuff. Not much energy whatsoever. Obviously, the volume down here, it does pick up slightly, but not sort of massively different. And again, here you sort of get, this was something else, and I ended up selling down here also. You got a really quick move down to the low, and then it just bidded it straight back up. It's sort of like someone getting liquidity and then pushing it lower, then just to buy it back. So the third time, you're sort of looking for something that you've watched here, you've watched there, and you're looking for something different in this zone, which is exactly what you got. So I was sitting here, sort of scratching my head after at this point, sort of thinking, you know, made money on sort of this, not this move, but in the S&P instead. And then I gave all that away trading the Bank of England day, this was. And then, so I was thinking, you've got to time this correctly, etc., etc. And what I mean is sort of, you've got such a more sophisticated sort of move that it traded down, similar to sort of that type, but it traded down, and then you could sort of see much more, the energy was much more there. You know, this is after the cash is open, so volume's much higher, and then you do get eventually the drop, but you're just looking, for me, it was looking for something different here and here, you know, which is built, like I put there, it's like built the structure for the day that is consolidated again, and then we've gone consolidated from the previous day, stayed below this area where you asked the question is, you know, is it a good area to sell? Of course, and you just get the continuation. So that was, for me, I could have positioned anywhere in here, but I decided to start positioning quite near the low, which was not the best sort of beginning to it. And then you've just taken out those massive levels, and you do get the giant complete drop in the end, which had the key levels were sort of in this sort of area. This is just a renko chart on how you could have kept, how I could have done better on keeping myself in the trade. So this line is just the day's lows here. I got in this little tiny choppy area, and sort of how to keep yourself in next time is sort of, you know, all these swing pullbacks, you know, except sort of that one because this is day's low there. Obviously, you could have probably you might have got caught out once, put B in your stop too tight, but if you're looking all the way down, it's not keeps you in the trade. You know, if you're just putting your stop all the way down, you know, when you get to this point, you probably might panic a bit, where it hasn't made a new low sort of here, and then it fails. So this might be in your zone where you possibly get most of your risk off if you're holding it. But this is something else that I was thinking, you know, looked into the trade, and then you see deltas going down with all the, you know, just a 3-tick, 3-tick renko it is. So that's what sort of looking at to try and next time keep yourself in trades on how continuous the move is. And then just the footprint on how I was looking at it at the time. I ended up selling here, you get a squeeze, etc. But it was just something I just wanted to put on anyway, than how you can, you know, keep yourself in with the delta moving. Again, and then you get the final flush. I'll come back to sort of how these sort of three quickly at the end. I'll be able to show much more detail. I'll press. I don't know how to fast forward. I'll show you in normal time as well. I'm not entirely sure whether, I think this is starting near the beginning, so if I fast forward it to there we go. Alright, so there. Come on. Right. Right. Let's play from here, and I'll be able to explain. It might just be straight on. So we're just looking at this one here at the moment. So this is just before I think I get in. So on the way down, I won't show you the sort of, you know, the beginning part of how this traded down, but we're just looking at this ladder here. So it was sort of, you know, slow to begin with, but it was more that sophisticated bit. And just, sorry, but I'll be able to explain. It traded, what I was looking for is just some sort of size to get me in. And it traded sort of 80 lots down, and I ended up just hitting it, and it didn't sort of hold. So the only concern I had at this point is that, well, not a major concern right now, because this, you know, the size slightly comes down, but the fact it traded 80 lots in one go, I thought, you know, this is good. Still a chance to go. And while we sit here, I'm like, okay, and something I always get caught out on is selling the low of candles, etc., because you end up getting that fear of missing out, when probably you could have positioned yourself so much earlier before this sort of this part. But while we're sitting here trading, I'm not too worried at this point. It does take its time. You know, this is what I mean by the sort of sophisticated sort of price action you get. It takes its time, you know. Also, what else is keeping me in is that the S&P is at its high, the bonds are near its low, and yen, you know, isn't too far off its low. So, you know, the yen's like nearly 10 ticks off its low. So if you're looking across the board, everything is still in line if you're looking for that potential risk move, which doesn't necessarily, you know, these all markets don't necessarily go, but the fact that they're at those key levels are, you know, something to always keep an eye on. Let's keep it on. Yeah. So it's just always something to keep an eye on, and you're just looking at the other sort of, you know, risk assets. So you got the Buxel as well, which is near its low, so it's helping other markets. That 38 level is just a marker I've got for, you know, I think it was a low or something like that, or earlier during the day. But at this point, to be honest, the price action slowed down quite a bit. Then it started to drift up, and I was sort of thinking, well, this isn't, you know, the most ideal thing in the world, but I'm expected to go offside anyway. Again, what I always think of is that I end up selling the low of every candle, just because you just get caught out. And then I'm sitting also, what was going through my mind at this point is that I've given my whole day back and some more, and I was sort of thinking, this needs to be right. I don't want to start now. You know, it was a trade that I wanted to be on for a while. You've been looking at all these levels, and you want to be able to commit to it, especially. And it was sort of when it got back to this point, this is when it started to really concern me, is that it started to pick up a bit of, you know, more quickness is what you know than the S&P, and everything sort of drops off. And then you start to get worried. But I just had to keep myself in. I didn't want to, you know, are you willing to take a hit on this? I was only small down at this point on the day. But then you start to see that it struggles to sort of trade in this zone here. It sort of struggles to just sort of trade. You know, it doesn't really start to bid up as much. The selling starts to come back. You sort of get what you started to get down the bottom here when the market couldn't trade lower is what I started to see when you're starting to go higher. You know, you're just trading the ones, twos. You know, there's not really the energy then to take it back up. And then you just want to see that selling come back in. Even at this point, I was still, you know, not feeling great, because you see it starts to pick up a bit. And then you just want to see something change here. Okay, you're offside, but technically the idea is different. The price action is different to before, at the beginning of the day. So I'm still sitting here going, this is fine. There's nothing really wrong with this. Well, I'm not being as confident as what I'm saying now, because obviously it's happened. But then you start to see a bit more selling. You know, you've seen 20 lots come down. You're not really seeing then it tick back here. You know, nothing's trading, the numbers are just changing, nothing's being traded there whatsoever. And then you trade 38 lots down, which is another good sign, and you're holding it. I like to always see when it holds the price, it doesn't trade a bit of size down and come straight back at you. That's when I start to get concerned. And then sort of have the rotations. So as long as you're trading down, you know, nothing's really trading up that much. You know, then if you're taking out that small bit of size, what I always like to see is if it does trade up, it comes back quite quickly. So then you sort of, you know, you could have worked a position in between. You could have sold a bit higher. Something I'm not great at and confident in is selling it much higher again, and trying to sort of figure out how do I position much better and have the confidence in it, and then your stop is above the 43s at this point. And then once you get in sort of down back to that rotation where it's doing that, you want to see it break back out through that, and you don't want to see it trade higher. So at the moment, you're feeling okay. I was thinking, as long as I get put on side here, I feel quite good, because then sort of this is the bottom of that full rotation from here to here. Once you break that, you know, small people that have bought have their stops below this area. So again, it's slow, but it's manageable. You just want it to break through back through these sort of like 38s at this sort of point. Something with a bit, not necessarily loads of energy, but you want to see it's something different than it was beforehand. So you do get a bit more, just at 25. Then you start to sell like 30s. 30 lots comes down, then another, you know. So then this is the point where I'm thinking, okay, now you've come back, you've tested, you failed to keep going. And then now you see the price action pick up quite a lot, and much more than the previous. Yes, your stop's still above the 43s, but now you've got a complete change of price action from when you're up here to here. You know, the speed of it's picked up. You know, bonds are going to tad lower. But when I was watching this back, I felt like you could have probably started to sell in here. You know, this is the problem I have. I thought it moves quick, starts to chop, not necessarily chop, but it starts to interact a bit more and a bit faster. And then it stops, and then I sort of start to not sort of sell in here when I think you can. It sort of holds this sort of high volume node, which I always seem to end up selling into, etc. You just got someone accumulating the buying on this side. You know, it trades down, and it keeps coming back. So at this point, you could have probably worked small, another bit of, not necessarily put loads of your size on, but you start to sell in here, and I'll be able to explain how I get caught out by sort of this bit. So then I'm waiting for the break of sort of those 27s at the moment to then start to sell. Again, when you could have probably sold, say, one more here, you just want to see a change. You want to see something be hit lower and take out the 27s and 26s, which is what I was sitting there looking for. To then make me sell more, because I feel like this is much better. And you get that set 60 lot here. So you trade that out, so I hit 2 more into that. And then you're just looking for that bit of continuation again. And then you sort of hold sort of this 600s, this sort of 24s. And then again, you're looking for the same thing. You want a bit more energy through there. You want it to hold. So this is then me, and then you could have been selling 22s there, 21s. So then I'm pretty much nearly full size on this at this point. So I'm thinking this is fine. You're seeing the good things. You saw the energy change. You saw size coming down. You're not seeing the ones. You're seeing a bit of size. You know, you see 100 lots being traded at prices, 30, 40 lots taken out. So you've got all of that, and you've broken the day's low. The only thing that I knew what concerned me here is when you spiked down, you were already trading back up here, which I know then gold sometimes would like to squeeze you, which again, it does at this point, at some point. But I'm still thinking this is good. I'm on side, you know. You know, it just does that again. It does that sort of area where somebody wants to buy. It's just willing to buy everything on the way down. And here again is that 70 lot that you can't trade down. You're not doing that holding price action again. And you've got that 79 lots there, which then push the market back up. So anything back down for me, I was looking now, is once you take out here, this 18s, this should just go, completely go if you're taking that out. So again, I'm willing to have a few ticks of risk here. You know, I don't want to see it start trading 30s and above, and you know, with that much size on. Then I try to, once I start to go outside, I'll try and scratch a few or get out of a few, take a few small losers there. But then again, I'm still willing to then take a hit higher up on just the one and take most of your size off. But these things, this is what I end up struggling to do, is then try and work the position higher again when it happens. So you get this squeeze, which is expected after you get that spike, quick like spike through when you're already trading back higher. And then it's for me, then once I'm offside, I never really average the position whatsoever. I end up selling the lows again when I should probably managing a position maybe slightly better. But for me personally, at this point in my career, I think this is pretty good from my own perspective on how I was patient throughout the whole day looking for this. And then it's still got sort of everything in line. The yen's come a bit lower, bonds are there. SPU has come off a bit, but when this goes, you know, they're the markets you're really looking at as just these to correlate with this. So again, sort of get a bit more action as it goes a bit higher. I think we trade up to 29s, and you just want to see that similar thing what you saw higher. You want to try and see something similar, the same. You just want to see that offer come back again, that rotation where it tests up to here, and then you have that other one, say this area, you just want to see it rotate sideways, and then you want to see it sort of break out of that. Once again, when you're back on side, I was still thinking, you know, I still want to put my size on. You got this daily low at 07, so got everything on by then. I think, you know, this is, you know, good to go. And again, I'm just still looking. This is the key zone, that 80 lot. But for me, that was the key. Once you take that out, it's definitely, you know, it's such a more sophisticated offer again. Just trading down. The energy's not necessarily there until it starts to pick up a bit more, like we have now. As soon as that gets taken out, I want to sell, and then I want to sell quite quickly again. Once it breaks through these 16s, as you hold that sort of 700 lots is holding it up here, being traded at sort of this price. So you want to see this get taken out. And see, I was always looking at what was trading down, so 70 lots traded down, so I hit that. and then you get that final spike. And again, you've got that squeeze, but it comes straight to my average price, and then you get that. So now you feel like you're correct, all of this is on, managed to get everything on now, and then and this is the problem I had. Volume's picked up, everything's, you know, spot on this trade at the moment. And this is your key area to break this, not get out. But this is all the first time that happened, and everything is flowing, so nothing's happening, everything's at the lows. And this is when I start to panic, when it's not at the lows all the time. You know, still trying to hold. And now, if you remember, I'll be able to show you on the footprint, this piece of time that we've spent here is where now I start to panic and start getting out of half, which is not the best thing, because this is the key area you want to be breaking. You're sort of using that trigger again, you're in with everything, and now it just churns in between here for not too long. I think maybe 5 minutes, but you just have to be patient. And it does, again, what we see is that someone wants to buy everything here. Sort of those 77s is willing just to buy everything here. So again, you know, you left the low volume, everything's right here. You don't need to, there's no need for me to panic whatsoever right now. Okay, yes, it's come back 15 ticks off the low. It's not ideal, and I think I got out of one more up here, as I can see now. Then I've got to have everything at the right key level, which is, for me, was not good. And then you start to come back and you trade straight back through the 77s, and then you still that rotation low, and you still see all the size being traded down, 70 lots, and everything's being clipped out. And then I start to, I'm not relaxed at this point. It's the first time for me being on side like this with full size. So from my perspective, you're going to panic slightly. You're not going to run this a point, which it eventually did on your first time, for me anyway. But the more experience you take from this trade, now I've only got one left, I should really then technically just put a stopping and just let this go, because the levels you're taking are so significant, so much more significant, and you get so much high speed is still going on. And again, I always see this when it trades and trades and trades at one price, and it always catches me out so many times. So there's nothing really not in telling you to get out right now. Everything is lows, lows, and the SPOO's nearly back at its high. So you just need to wait and wait. You know, there's nothing telling you to necessarily get out. It's just the way it offers. There's just no buyers interested. The seller's just willing just to hammer absolutely everything at this at the moment. So you're just taking such a massive level that this is what you should be seeing. This is what you want to be seeing. And then once you've taken those lows with that lot of aggressive, you know, sort of, you know, spike through SPOOs, and then quickly goes up to the high, and everything's still at the low. So this is, you still keep yourself in, and eventually I just get out, because I don't necessarily have a reason. I suppose it's just called panic at station at the right. So then I end up just getting out there. So to me, it was, you know, a perfectly fine trade. You know, so I'm managing to hold all the way to sort of the 60s area, which is when it gets a bit choppy in here. But there's not necessarily any reason for me to get out. The delta's all good. It's just these are the other things you can do to keep yourself in when you have these big directional moves. But this was the area I did get in, and then when it squeezed, so then you get that bit of churn that we got. Once you made that high, you got that pullback. Again, on the 10 tick rotation one, you just got that slight bit of churn, and once you've come out of that, you break the low and you get that another slight rotation. It wasn't the nicest beginnings, but if you could have positioned yourself so much better. Ooh. And this was that area where I started to exit out of everything. That's where I started to sell So this was the first time I sold everything into it, I think it was, and then it squeezed me, and then I got out of everything, and then this is the second time where I started to sell again. And then you got that breakdown, and this is this one here is where I got out of all pretty much everything there. Where for me now, looking at it, once you break out of this rotation, you get that move down, everyone's finished trying to stop you from everyone buying it, trying to stop you, and then they're all finished with their business. So that's how I would now. I don't mind seeing this. Sometimes it makes me panic quite a bit when you're seeing this, you know, and you're watching it trade into its low and it's not going until eventually it does, and I've got out of 2/3 of everything there. But just different ways to keep yourself in trades and how I would look at, you know, the footprint, etc., etc. Sort of improvement areas I put for following trades and you know, different, you know, possible trades you're going to be in is just to understand what type of, you know, trade you've taken for one sort of bigger time frame, what type of, you know, game players you're going to be having. You know, what they're going to be taking part. Is it big areas that, you know, you're going to get a massive move from, or is it going to be a 10-20 tick move, something like that? I need to, for me, change that perspective. I think everything's going to go miles now. After having that trade, I started to now think everything's going so far, when all market conditions change. Like this week specifically, everything's so much tighter and there hasn't been as much opportunity. And it's where you start to lose money by having all these ideas that don't necessarily play off because you haven't got the right market conditions for them. So that's one key thing I put down. Then understanding, you know, you're going to hold much longer. Asking yourself some better questions during the day, sort of how the market's trading and where it is. Sort of you could have, you know, managed to sell the single prints again that you left in the morning from the China comment. There's another way to get in, and then you would have a much better positioning. Not to change your mind on your trade decision, on the entry exits. You know, that 80 level I should have been staying in, shouldn't really be getting out of anything that wasn't my original idea. They were the key areas that you should have been breaking through. Use the other sort of indicators like the footprint and the renkos for me. You know, even the EMAs people put on the 1 and the 5 minute candles and the candle highs on the continuation moves. They're sort of things that people do to keep themselves in. Same as like a VWAP, you know, mainly in the Bund. I do use that at times, as I previously showed. And as well, not to panic. You know, it's the same thing as changing. When you panic, you change your trade decision. When you was right the whole time, you know, just try and hold it and try and hold as much size as you can. But always you can improve on all of these for me.